Hi, it's Evie. I'm going to tell you a story of what happened to my daughter when she was 13, how I found out about it when she was 28. It's not a story for young ears. I'm just going to say that up front. I'm going to be very careful with my wording, but it's still not something for a young person to hear. She started sneaking out at age 12. That's when I found out about it. And it was harmless stuff, bunch of girls running together, throwing pebbles at somebody's bedroom window kind of thing. Like just the fact of being without adult supervision, going to a slumber party and they all sneak out, that kind of thing. Not that that's good, but at that point it was harmless. When she was 13, she snuck out to let me back up. When she was 28, she was living on her own with her boyfriend, and I went over to her house. We were going to go somewhere together. And she invited me in, and we were standing in the kitchen, and she said, "Let me run back and finish putting my hair up or whatever, and I'll be back in a minute." And I said, "Okay." So I waited in the kitchen, and you know those long grocery lists that they're really long and skinny, and they have the magnet, and you can put them on your refrigerator? Well, she had one of those, and it was sitting on the kitchen counter, and it had a hole in it where you could hang it as well. And the gum had come off of the top of the pad. And so she had a pencil sitting in the top of it. It was pretty thick, so the pencil was standing up. And there was one sheet of it off to the side, and it was right between the stove and the refrigerator. So I picked it up and I started reading it. And she was describing going into an empty house with this girlfriend of hers and her boyfriend. And she goes on to describe how there was an adult man in there that she didn't know. Her friend and boyfriend were off in another room doing whatever. And this adult man grabbed her and threw her to the ground, which was still concrete, and grabbed some plastic from the construction site and held it over her neck and head with, like, it was kind of like wrapped, and then he, was like this. And then he did what you think he did. And I'm horrified because what I thought I was going to read was a grocery list because, it was like 3 or 4 words per line going on down. And I thought maybe, we were going to get groceries while we were out. I didn't know. I wasn't thinking I was reading a secret on the kitchen counter. And, I feel all kinds of emotions and questions. And I grabbed it and I ran back to her room where she was. And I was like, "When did this happen? And why didn't you tell me?" And she said, well, she started crying and she said, "I didn't tell you because I snuck out." And I said, "But this is serious. This is much more serious than sneaking out of the house." And she said, "I know, but it was my fault. It was my fault. If I hadn't have snuck out, then that wouldn't have happened." And I said, "It's your fault for sneaking out, but it's not your fault that that happened." And she's 28 at the time, and my mind is just spinning backwards because this particular night I knew nothing about it. I knew that nothing was wrong because she snuck out, she came back in, and life went on. But things had went downhill very gradually from the time that she was 13. Um, a lot more signs of her doing things that she shouldn't be doing. And a lot of those are different stories for a different time. But by the time she was 17, she had moved out with her boyfriend, and he and his father lived in an apartment, just the two of them. And then my daughter moved in with them. And they were using a substance that is brownish in color and it's injected. And I was so upset by this, of course, any parent would be. But I found out what a bad situation she was in from her friends that talked to me and told me what kind of a situation she was actually living in because she didn't tell me. She had cut her hair off very short and it was black, dyed black. She was a blonde. And I saw her one time in the nearly a year that she was gone, and she had gotten extremely skinny, like almost too skinny. And her hair was very dirty and oily looking, and her face was a whitish gray. And I mean, we went to a Chili's and we sat down and we ate, her boyfriend, and myself. And I felt worse after having lunch with her than I did not seeing her, because she was very hard to get a hold of. She would rarely answer the phone if I called her. Maybe she would answer a text message. So I had no idea what bad shape she was actually in. Well, by the time she turned 18, I did get to talk to her. She answered the phone and I said, listen, I said, you're 18 years old now. It's not like I can tell you what to do, but I'm asking you to move back home and get this issue taken care of and get on the right path if you want to go to college, if you want to get a job, or because she wasn't working. Whatever you want to do, I'm here to help you. We'll get it figured out, but come home where you can get some good meals, stop doing what you're not supposed to be doing. And surprisingly, she was agreeable to it. Thankfully, she was agreeable to it. As I looked back on the time period, her being 13 and realizing that that was 2002, that was the same year that I had nerve surgery on my ankle. And so I had a pretty long recovery from that. I was on crutches and sometimes in a wheelchair to go to work. There was too long of a distance from my car to my desk. So I was doing the bare minimum I could to work full time and get groceries. I mean, I did. I got groceries with crutches till I got to the electric cart, and that's how I did it. And so I was extremely exhausted and in a lot of pain for many months. Not that that's gonna, not that that is an excuse to ignore what your child is going through, but I didn't have the signs that were at least apparent enough that something was that wrong, that she had turned to doing something so devastating. And of course that would have been after this incident happened. But I think she was very careful and very slow as she started out. So it wasn't obvious to me. If she was at a friend's house for the night, then I wouldn't be the wiser to it, right? There's really no point of this story other than it's part of my history. And as anyone that's watched any of my videos knows, that my daughter passed away March of 2021. And it was because of what started when she was 13 years old. But I was on a live yesterday evening. Well, no, I take that back. I was rewatching a live yesterday evening, and she was talking about she's a therapist. Her name is Rhonda, and she was talking about some issues, that she counsels about. And this story came back up in my mind. And I kind of wanted to tell it. I kind of wanted to share it. And I don't know if it would help anybody later on, if they see some kind of a sign that their teenager or however old is acting different at all, to hopefully open up some sort of conversation so that they will feel at ease to let you know what's going on, because I didn't know, and apparently I didn't ask. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.